The following program contains adult language and themes and is intended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
I think that all black people, I mean, of course it's not true even just to say it, but I think that most black people are grounded in the blues. It's just part of life, you know, and when you hear the blues, it says something. I think it says something to everybody, but it says something specifically to black Americans. It's part of, you know, our history and our tragedy and our religion, etc. And so when you hear Robert Johnson, you hear the whole history of the blues and of jazz and of rock and roll, all in this one guy, you know, who, you know, went insane in the Delta at some point.
I run into R.L. at harvest time in Arcola, Mississippi. He told me to come on later and join him, but by the time I got there, he was already at work playing his guitar. He was playing a new song like I never heard the blues played before. It was his own words, and they were something, but I didn't care about the words at first. I was moved by his wild voice and the way he throwed his head back like something in him might break if he didn't holler it off with song. He was like some righteous Baptist minister wrapped in prayer. Not that religious folk would ever claim old R.L. and his devil music. Soup Spoon turned to Gerald Allen Pickford and winked. The would-be historian had come to Kiki's apartment 3 times before Soup Spoon was well enough to tell his tale. Gerald adjusted the volume on his Radio Shack tape recorder. Kiki poured sour mash into her glass. He was a skinny boy, Soup Spoon continued, with one good eye and one dead one that floated in its socket. With that dead eye, they said he could see past all what we see into hell, where everyone knows the blues come from anyway. His hands was like angry spiders up and down them guitar strings. No 2 men could play what R.L., Bob Leroy, Robert Johnson could play. He was a field nigger, too lazy to pull cotton. He was scarred and scared and smallish. He loved his mama and almost every other woman he ever met. But like I was saying, it was late in the day and there wasn't too many people out because it was cotton chopping time in Mississippi and all the colored folks was working except for me and R.L. and maybe 5 or 7 lazy souls like us. I remember 4 nappy-headed boys and an old man called Crawdaddy and 2 young girls. The girls was Linda Powell and Boobie Redmond. The boys was all stamping their feet and nodded their agreement with what R.L. sang. And old Crawdaddy shook his shoulders like he was a young man again, ready to get out on the dance floor or pull down his terrible Texas jackknife. It was like hurricane weather that day, both warmish and cool with a wind coming up from the Gulf and mockingbirds wheeling across the sky at every note. When R.L. sung Me and the Devil, Boobie's jaw dropped down. She had on a plain cotton dress with a bright red rag across her head. She was a healthy girl with upstanding bosom and sturdy legs, but when she heard R.L., her jaw hung open and her hands dangled at her side. By the time R.L. told us that his evil soul would catch the Greyhound, I thought that Boobie might just fall down and cry. That boy could play the clothes right off a woman's back. Excuse me, Mr. Wise, Gerald said, but is that the same song that we have on the records today? What? Me and the Devil. Is that the same as we have in the recordings? Gerald held up the tiny microphone in order to get the earth-shattering pronouncement. Boy, do you want to hear this here story or you want to ask me all kinds of stupid questions? Gerald put the microphone back on the dining table and clasped his big hands. Kiki pushed the bucket of fried chicken over to Gerald and blew him a silencing kiss. Now, where was I? Soup Spoon asked. Oh, yeah. We was out on the street. R.L. stamped his hard soles and sung new blues. I mean, he was playing music that nobody ever heard before. He was making history right there in front of our eyes. The people come more and more, and the nickels fall in his old bean can. When there was enough of a crowd, I went across the street and took out my own guitar, because, you know, I could play too. Bluesmen in the Delta liked to play both sides of the street. It made us a kind of a spectacle that the country Negroes wanted to see. And it didn't hurt too much if you was on the road and you had somebody willing to jump in if a field hand got mad at the way you made his girlfriend laugh. I guess RL's music was too much for Boo because she come across the street. Really, it was just a graded dirt road to hear my soft, sweet blues. Satan wasn't after me. That's why I'm still here in the flesh. But you know, that was a day to remember. It was the end of a hard day in the fields. People were so tired that their fingers dragged in the dust, but they still come to see what everybody else was doing. Even the sky was curious. Big old fat clouds rushed over and then passed for a glimmer of sunshine that would blind for a minute. People was yelling, "Play it," and "all right." Some of the girls was moving their feet, and the boys were soon to dance with them, because back then, when a woman got an urge to dance, she was serious. If her boyfriend didn't want to dance, she'd take her another man by the hand. That's just the way it was. You know, we played and played. The nickels fell like hail. Everybody was moving to RL's evil moods. And when they got tired, they'd come over to me, and I'd soothe them with songs like "Got Me a Country Girl" or "Blind Catfish Blues." There must have been more than 40 people listening and dancing to me and Bob. 40 poor as the day they was born, colored souls. We was higher than a holy roller shot when the county sheriff come up. Heck Wrightson was a white man, big as 2 men, and bigger than a hungry rat down your pants. He threw his billy stick on the wood sidewalk so that it rolled and clattered on the slats. He called out, "Everybody better hit the ground by the time that stick stopped rolling, because I'm shooting waist high." Boobie was the first one to scream. Then black folks started running with their heads down and their hands up. Colored souls piled one on the other, and Heck was true to his word. He held a .41 caliber pistol at his belt line and squeezed off shots at a leisurely pace. Pow! Bang! Heck was smiling. Linda Powell hit the ground with this loud humph. I seen her boyfriend lie across, run away from her, and go around the general store. I was in an awful state because of my guitar, which I had received from my granddaddy and which I named Earl John after him. I couldn't just throw it down and run wild with it, so I tried to lower myself down off the side of the wood walkway. People was still yelling and rolling, and I was leaning over the side, praying to God that I'd save my life along with my guitar. And then there was this hard boot next to my head. "Get up from there, nigga," the boot said. And I knew right then that Heck Wrightson had got me.
Racism starts there, starts where you meet with other people and have conflict. And of course, black people, if they want to do anything in America, have to experience this racism, because you can't stay only among black people, because black people don't own America. White people own America. So if you want a job or a good job or money or a house or a car, then you have to come into proximity with white people, and then you experience racism.
I look up and seen Heck towering. That ugly gun muzzle looked down at me. With his other hand, Heck had RL by the scruff of his neck. The look on Bob's face spoke the whole history of Mississippi colored life. RL was a brash young man, and he was conceited and wild. But when that lawman grabbed him, he just slumped down and took it. His good eye was staring out beyond the dirt road, and his bad one searched 1,000 miles further on. Even his lips sagged. Because when a white man, especially a lawman, grabbed a nigger, that was all she wrote. If you gave him any trouble or any mouth, or if you stood up straight and looked him in the eye, if you did any of them things, there was death waiting. Death just as quick as my mama's biscuits. Heck dragged us down to the white barber shop where his uncle extracted teeth and cut hair. They kept a cell in the back. It was just a closet with a cast iron door frame that sported 5 metal bars. But it wasn't much of a jail. They didn't even have bars on the little window, but we had enough sense not to try and get away. Bob sat himself down in the corner like he had been punished at school. He sat on the floor because there was no furniture or even a stool in the room. The only thing there was a tin pail that smelled powerfully from sour vomit and shit. "Hey, Bob," I sushed when Heck went out to talk to his uncle. RL shook his head so hard that his cheeks made a flapping noise, but he didn't say a word. I turned away from him to the cell door and looked out into the barber's room. Heck had put our guitars in the corner underneath where the customers hung their bags and coats. I wanted to yell out for that white man to put our guitars somewhere safe, but then I worried that if I said something, he might have popped a string or worse, just for spite. That's when Bob started in. "Oh, yeah, yeah, mama, yeah," he sung out. "Oh, mama, he cried. Then he threw his head back and crooned out a long, high note. "What's that?" I heard Heck say. I could see the barber, a red-headed man, look up from the head bowed down in front of him. I grabbed RL and shushed. "Quiet, Bob. Sheriff don't like no noise. But by then, Heck was at the cell door. He had on Levi jeans and a snap-down-the-front cowboy shirt. There was this awful green patch of skin across his left cheek, and he was chewing on a nail, as most men might chew on a toothpick. He says, "What's going on in here?" And I said, "Ain't nothing." But just then R.L. go, "Oh, mama, oh, what's wrong with him?" Heck had his fist around one of the bars, and I was afraid that he'd yank that pole right out the door and beat us both to death. R.L. got spells, I told him. I figured it was true. He go, "You trying to mess with me, boy?" And I says, "No, sir. No, sir, I ain't." And I fell right into the plantation nigger stoop. I mean, I was sitting on the floor, but I stooped just the same. I let my head hang down and my lips hang loose when I talk. I know you don't want to hear about how somebody might act like a nigger when a white man crack his whips, but you ain't never lived through the early South like I did. You ain't never been on the floor with a man like a bear looking down on your weak flesh. Sue Spoon had begun to breathe hard at this point in his story. He reached over and picked up a glass of whiskey that Kiki had poured. He finished the glass before starting to speak again. Heck swung the jail door open and went right over to R.L. "Stop that growling, boy." And R.L. says, "Oh, mama," and he swayed from side to side. Heck hit Bob so hard that that poor boy rolled across what little floor there was. But he jumped right up into a crouch and scrabbled back to his corner and started singing again. And Heck hit him again. But this time, R.L. had his behind anchored. You could see how hard the slap was, but R.L. just shuddered and moaned. The sheriff was a little worried when he seen that his slaps didn't bother R.L., so he turned to me and said, "What's wrong with him?" "Spells," I said. I hunched my shoulders up to my ears. Had him since he was a baby. That time, Heck used his fist on R.L. That boy's head rolled back, and so did his eyes. He slid down on his side, but he was still singing, "Oh, mama, yeah, yeah." And a sweet smile crossed his beat-up face. Heck backed on away from him then. He looked down on that poor blues master with a kind of awe. He whispered, "Spells. Bad ones," I tells him. Then he says, "Get this nigga up and get out of here," and banged out of the door and walked out to the barber shop. I helped R.L. up and half drugged him through the jailhouse, and all the time he was moaning and rolling his eyes. I pulled him outside and propped him up against a wall, and then I went back in for our guitars. I got them both and slung them around my neck, and then I stood there, looking at the floor. And any brave soul who might have thought that I was a coward to bow my head in that cell might wonder at me now, bowing with courage, because I was standing my ground with Mr. Wrightson right then. "Something wrong, boy?" he asked of me when it come clear that I weren't going nowhere. "Our money, sir," I said. And he sneered and he said, "What money?" "That tin can R.L. had," I told him. "I had one too, but his had more nickels and dimes because he was playing longer. I just started when you come to arrest us." "What you saying, nigga?" Heck said, and you know it was a sore on my mind to hear him talk like that. But I answered in a civil tongue, "I just want the can, sir. That's all. Can is on. We's the one played for it." When Heck grinned, I seen that his teeth was green too. He say, "You broke the law playing for a sunset." But I told him, "No, sir. No, sir, the law just say that you can't play on Sunday in Washington County. You can't play day or night on Sunday." And he knew that it was true. To this day, I remember that one lonely drop of sweat that trickled down my spine. In them tiny little seconds between my last protest and Heck's reply, I saw a mouse come out of a crack in the corner of the wall. That little thing looked at us and got so scared that he threw himself against the wall 3 times before he could make it back into his hole. Heck strolled over to his coat and pulled R.L.'s can out of his pocket. He held the can up and shook it next to his ear. Then this bitter stain crossed his face, what some folks might call a smile. The can hit me in the shoulder before I seen him throw it. Silver clattered all over the floor. I was down on my knees picking up whatever I could, while them white men laughed and stamped around my fingers. After I got almost half of what fell, I jumped up and run out of there. They stamped their feet like they was coming after me, but the door slammed on behind. The guitars banged together and cried. The white men was laughing in the barber shop, but the street was quiet. Robert Johnson was gone.
It's a mistake to try to write about Robert Johnson, the man. I thought about it for a long time. I read everything I could on him. And I finally realized that 10,000 men had their lives that had the life that Robert Johnson had, but none of them was a musical genius. And so what I wanted to write about him was only as a part where his genius touched people, and not, you know, well, who killed him or who made love to him or who had his children. I mean, that stuff is not nearly as important, I don't think.
Mary's store was a big square room with a counter running across the back wall and shelves full of canned and box goods behind that. In the middle of the floor, she had a pool table that had been shipped all the way from Ohio. There were tables and chairs around the room for nighttime when people came out to drink. Mary, who was a big woman, sat next to a cash box behind the counter. She eyed every soul who came in through the door. So when she saw me and RL come in looking like yesterday's pork chop, she says, "What's wrong with you and your friend, Soup Spoon Wise?" I told her that Heck Wrightson had us in jail, but she says, "I know that. What I mean is, why does your friend look so beat up?" RL was looking around the room like a man coming awake after a long afternoon nap. "You got music tonight, Mary Wade?" he asked her. She said no. It was a weeknight, and the juke joint wasn't going to have enough customers to pay musicians to play. But RL says that we played for a bottle of whiskey and a hat on the table. "Yeah, Mama," he said to Mary, "we played a house down for a quart bottle and a hat for some tips." And RL cracked a smile that would have made a sweet girl's photograph cry. He said, "You know, we bluesmen, Mary Wade, and bluesmen born to trouble in a land that Christendom never see." Mary was no saint. She loved the blues and the men and women who played it. She got all coy and toothy and said, "You and Soup Spoon can play, okay? I'll give you a pint right now, and if we get some people in here like you had outside, then I'll pass you another pint." And we took our bottle and sat in the corner. I told RL that I couldn't play too well because of my shoulder. It was stiff from where Heck had hit me. And RL rubbed his swole chin and said, "You just strum on behind me, Soup. You just follow me, and I'll show you how to get there." Boobie and Linda got the word about us, and they came to help us drink our liquor. Kiki said. She got up from the table and walked unevenly over to the bed. Gerald's small tape recorder caught the sagging springs of her seating herself at the head of the bed and the loud scratch of the match she used to light her cigarette. When we finished our pint, RL come up with 2 bits for another one, and then I scraped together my change for a third. Boobie sat down next to me, but her eyes were fixed on RL's baby face. Linda was laughing and grabbing onto RL's shoulder whenever anybody said the least funny thing. Lyle Cross come in and sits down on the other side of Linda, but she acts like he ain't even there. You see, she was mad at him for running off when Heck was shooting. And for all I could tell, RL didn't even know that Lyle was there. RL would put his arm around Linda's shoulder and laugh and make friendly, just like they was on a date. I thought he should have showed a little more sense because, like I said, RL was a small man, and Lyle Cross was as big as a sharecropper comes. But nothing happened because Lyle was ashamed of the way he acted and because we were the musicians. Mary's was getting full about then, and the people wanted to be entertained. They didn't want no mess with their music. We started to play Robert Johnson's blues naturally. I don't remember him or me saying, "Let's play." All it was is that we had our guitars in our hand, and the music started. RL played music that told you how it was. He'd sing like a miserable hound, yowling after a bitch in heat, and here he can't get in through the fence. Boobie Redmond and Linda was near us. Linda give Bob a kiss now and then. Lyle moved back toward the door to show that he didn't care, and 60 or more people danced and nodded, put their hands together, and drank whiskey. You don't understand how it was for us back then. You think all that drinking and consorting and playing with danger was too much, and why didn't we do something else? But you don't know our place back then. We was the bottom of the barrel. We was the lowliest kind of godless riffraff. Migrants and roustabouts. We were bad from the day we was born. Blues is the devil's music, and we was his children. RL was Satan's favorite son. He made us all abandon, and you know that was the only way we could bear the weight of those days. We played until the early morning. Our hat had more than $5 in it, and we put a deep hole in Mary's whiskey supply. Lyle shamed himself by crying over Linda and left Mary's store. Later on, outside, RL told me that Linda took care of her bedridden grandmother in a big house just outside of town. This grandmother stayed upstairs, and we could go downstairs with the girls if we wanted. And RL made it clear that was what he wanted to do. Ain't she going to hear us down there, I asked him. He says, nah, she deaf lets you shout in her ear. And she all alone out there because they keep this wolf dog called Loopy. Man be a fool to go in there without Linda because he'd have to shoot that wild dog and ain't nothing in the house worth the bullet. Booby and Linda come up then and asked us if we was ready. They walked us out the main street into the moonlit Mississippi night. The dark clay road was hard as cobblestones under my shoes, and the Delta spread out in front of us. For all that it was barren, the Delta was a beautiful land, too. It was a hard land, but true. It had the whippoorwill and the hoot owl and crickets for music. It had pale, dead trees that stood out in the moonlight like the hands of dead men reaching up out of the ground. And the Delta smelled of sweet earth and jasmine and magnolia. I remember our feet trudging and the sound of nickels and those lovely girls laughing at nothing at all. When we came to the house, the wolf dog slavered and snapped, but Linda took him and locked him into a room offside of the porch. She lit a single kerosene lantern, and Bob turned it down low. I had a quart of shine for Mary, so we drank for a while at first. Linda sits on R.L.'s lap, feeding him whiskey, laughing and sticking her tongue down his throat. Booby would watch them kiss for a while, and then she kissed me. Once, R.L. ran his long finger down Linda's blouse, and Booby shivered in my arms. Between hugs, I just had to ask, where you learn to play blues like you do, R.L.? We was all settled on a big bed. The girls was draped on us, and our hands was all in their clothes. Made a trade for us, Sue. That's what he said. Give up his right eyes for the blues. Made a blood sacrifice with a witch woman down Clarksdale. Soiled his hands in the blood of an animal, and then goes out to the crossroads. He said that, and then he jammed his hand under Linda's skirt. Booby saw that, and she stuck her hand into my pocket. And you know, you add that to the whiskey, and the room will start to spin. But then all of a sudden, someone yells, "I'll kill you!" And the lamp is turned over. R.L. shouts, "Hey!" But then his voice is cut short like somebody grabbed his windpipe. I jump over to his side of the bed and wraps my arm around a body that I swear was carved from stone. "Let me go!" the statue yelled, and then there's this flash of light from a lantern getting set up straight. I was hugging on Lyle Cross, and he was killing R.L. Lyle takes one hand from R.L.'s throat so he can throw me across the room. Booby was on the floor yelling at Lyle, and Linda was nowhere to be seen. And then it was like everything in my life stopped.
When it comes to for being black, when it comes to political stuff, when I'm telling these stories, blackness is a very important part of it, because blackness is what defines daily life. Blackness is what defines who you are, where you can go, how much money you can make, how you can plan for your future, how you're gonna, how you're gonna have hope for your children. And so when I'm doing that, but when I'm doing something else, when I meet somebody on the street and say, "Hi, how you doing?" I don't think I'm a black person saying, "Hi, how you doing?" to a Korean person or to a white person, So, yes, in my work, of course, I identify very closely with being black. But in life, I'm just Walter.
I was on the floor next to my granddaddy's guitar. R.L. was dying on the other side of the room, and what I thought of was the music R.L. had played that day. Music I never even dreamed of until I heard it. But once I heard it, it seemed like I had always known it. Like Bob had found the truth somewhere and give it to me for a lark. And then I was moving again. I slammed the side of that dear instrument into Lyle's flat nose. I hit him so hard that the string snapped back at me. Blood was spouting from the sharecropper's face. Earl John turned to splinters in my hand. I heard Linda say, "Get him," and the dog that was half wolf was on Lyle, and Lyle was screaming and running from the house. Soup Spoon sat back a minute. Gerald took that moment to take the cassette out and flip it over to get whatever else the old man had to say. Soup Spoon looked over at Kiki. She looked him in the eye in a way that she had never done before. "Is that all, Mr. Wise?" Gerald asked after finishing with the recorder. Soup Spoon looked at Gerald a long moment before saying more. R.L. and me lit out that night. We hitched a ride on a hay truck that went all the way to Leland. R.L. wanted to stay with Linda, but we finally got him to go. He swore that he'd come back to her one day. Years later, I heard that Lyle had lost his hand to Lupe, which ruined him for sharecropping. He went down to New Orleans to live with his auntie, but he was broken after that tragedy and took to drinking. 2 years after that, they brought him home to be buried. I traveled with R.L. for a while after that, but one night, just outside of Panther Burn, there was this fire. Me and Bob was playing hard, and things got so wild that the juke joint caught on fire. The whole place burnt to the ground. I ate too much smoke and had to rest for a while. I guess I could have caught up to RL, but I just couldn't. I didn't hear about him again until I hear one of his songs on a phonograph record that a rich colored undertaker had in Florence, Alabama. A few weeks after that, I heard that Robert Johnson was dead. They said Satan came and got him in a little place outside of Greenwood, Mississippi. Satan, or a jealous man. Sue Spoon sighed again and left 3 blank minutes on Gerald's tape. When he finally spoke again, his voice was deeper and hoarse, like a man talking for the first time in the morning. You know, I played a whole lot of blues in these 50 years since he died. I made a lot of people happy and a lot of people dance. I could play anything on my guitar. Sometimes I look out into a crowd and see women with tears in their eyes. But the music they was hearing was just a weak shadow, just like some echo of something that happened a long time ago. They was feeling something, but not what Robert Johnson made us feel in Arcola. They can't get that naked. And they wouldn't want to, even if they could. Because, you know, Robert Johnson's blues would rip the skin right off your back. Robert Johnson's blues get down to a nerve that most people don't even have no more. I never played the blues. Not really. I run after it all these years. I scratched at its coattails and copied some notes, but the real blues is covered by mud and blood in the Mississippi Delta. The real blues is down that terrible pathway where RL traveled, suffering and singing till he was dead. I followed him up to the gateway, but Satan scared me silly and left me back to cry. Thank you.
No, I don't look at myself on the cutting edge. I look at myself, trying to keep my head above water as a writer.